And one of the first things I'm surprised about is that we're not going to see the combination of VortiX and Luciferon. You would have thought that the Spanish bros will play together, but this is, I think, just a commitment to Mista and just a showcase of how much they trust him. You know, the Spanish bros could say, oh yeah, we're going to handle the 2v2s and you can just join in for the 3v3s, Mista. Or they could say, wait a minute, we're better as a team, and instead of, you know, just playing with my brother, possibly communicating in Spanish, I'm just going to go, communicate English, play with Mista, and I think that's going to give them an extra level of strategic depth available.
Yeah, I think it's like, you know, you have to be comfortable with each other, right? So you can't just go, oh, I'll just let the Spanish bros handle this every time on the 2v2.
Yes.
Because, you know, if you lose a map, well, no, you need to get in there at some point, but that's how that works. So you have to balance that out. It's especially interesting to think about that dynamic at play with these teams that have a fourth member, right? Like, you then have to question, you know, did they get more practice time in 2v2s or less? Arguably, they could have got more because, you know, if you're just trying to practice 2v2s, you know, you might be available at different times. You can kind of just rotate. I think it's also that there is this kind of variability that's cool to think about when you bring in a fourth member, because although they might run English Mongols on both these formats, maybe X player plays Mongols incredibly differently, right? Like, that's something you always have to consider, especially if you're an opponent researching these guys. You know, it's even more manpower that you need to put into like finding out what they do each game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's going to be a lot more flexibility with that involved. Plus, you also have to consider factors like, for example, hot player, cold player, someone warmed up already versus someone being cold. But look at that. Speaking of being cold, that blade looks very cold out there from Mista. Getting the villager pressured out there. This is a tower being built by airstrike on the teammate's gold mine. Will be cancelled, but bounty was given to the Khan. It's a big mistake out there from the Koreans to start.
It's unfortunate they made this choice as well. Like, I'm looking at the layout. Maybe there's a world in which you could have just had your English player pull a few of his villagers across, set up a mining camp over here. Like, typically, we've seen on this map before, on the pit specifically, in these type of compositions, you know, the English player will bring 2 or 3 villagers over, right, try and poke and prod at his opponent. It's a bit more difficult up against men-at-arms, though, admittedly, right, because they just have so much range resistance, so you don't do much damage. But you can already see the amount of damage that one men-at-arms took. So maybe the play here would have been airstrike pulling 3, possibly 4 villagers, and essentially just keeping them in Victo's base.
It could have been an interesting idea. Still, Villager OP feels like they were thrown off by this aggression. They were, to a certain extent, anticipating this, but you actually have to question how much they were expecting 2 men-at-arms to arrive.
I think it's like you have to kind of anticipate this opening. The surprising detail is there was no kind of mirrored attempt by airstrike at all. I think, admittedly, from his perspective, like, the logic is, you know, this wouldn't work because they have Dark Age aggression on 2 players. We have Dark Age aggression on 1. So they always knew there was going to be a problem. So it looks like instead they're going to make this wise choice. They're going to run the French villagers across the English base. I actually think this makes a lot more sense to have done originally, because English don't really need much of their gold in the feudal age timing. And then also, on top of it, you're always going to be near to all these villages that have bows that can defend you.
Yeah, for sure. Alternatively, he could have gone to the north to a large gold pile, but that's probably... The smart thing here is that you don't want to go there. You see,
No.
First of all, VortiX is already scouting that because that's the obvious second place you can go. But a bigger thing is that, as you said, you're always going to be closer to an English teammate who can help protecting you. But you got to be cautious still. One villager goes down.
He's not crying loud enough in the Discord. He needs to be louder. Scream, airstrike, please help me. It's right now, airstrike are just ignoring him completely. He's rushing the tech up instead, so Lombos are now going to start being pushed out. But definitely a lot of damage done. Now, of course, this did slow down Los Pollos Hermanos' timing into feudal age, but they're on their way now, and I definitely think it's paid dividends in the meantime.
For sure, because one thing you eliminated is the knight component from Villager OP. And if you look at what they're doing, Silver Tree coming up, there's going to be trade involved here. And the biggest threat to your trade, obviously, is going to be the knights. You slow it down, you open up the opportunity for early trade.
This is kind of tough to look at right now. They need to get aggression back on the other side. This is where Victo should be really handy with the knights, but we can see School Cavalry is only now underway. It feels heavily delayed, actually. He's going to be mirrored by the timings of both members of Los Pollos Hermanos. So I'm not even sure if he's going to get enough knights out. Like, considering the way they've laid themselves, like adding in spears early from the Mongol player, this is a brilliant opening from the Hermanos boys.
Yeah, if you look at the feudal age timing from the French player, that tells you the story. This is a very delayed feudal age. it's gonna match up the timing of an English player who went double man-at-arms at the beginning. That's very slow for a French player. Yeah, exactly.
And a Mongol player who went Silver Tree with 4 spears and 2 horsemen, right? That's what I was saying. Like, this is a really, really bad timing. And I don't think he... did he even get wheelbarrow? I don't think he did. He didn't even set up a mill. So sometimes French players have the argument, I got wheelbarrow, that slowed me down. That's not even the case here. This is just a brutal start for Victor. You know, Airstrike at least has an opening to this game. I just don't know how much an English player can do on his lonesome.
Well, looks like Victor at least has gotten wheelbarrow.
Yeah. But I should hope so for the amount of running he done in the end here, to be honest.
But look at what the plan is here for VortiX. It's not going to be hardcore trade. He's going to go heavy on the horsemen because when you have the numbers advantage, you can actually chip away on those knights as well, and they will definitely have the numbers advantage. And of course, Airstrike is making longbows, so just going mass horsemen over here is going to be a pretty good response to everything that the Villager OP team can bring to the table.
It's just a brilliant play. Like, it kind of felt weird at first because VortiX went for these spears, but like naturally you have to when you're up against knights, right? Like, it just doesn't feel good. That's one of the annoying things about going up against French-English is you, as the Mongol player, kind of end up doing what feels like the bad choice, but it at least has some layering of value to your comp. And then go back to the horseman just makes a lot of sense because that means he's going to be able to keep numbers over the French knights and intercept them. And should this trade ever get discovered, he can just stab them to death. Like, weirdly enough, horsemen are quite effective when you have 2 to 3 the count of the knights at taking them out.
And speaking of horsemen, double stables coming out here from Mista. Yeah. I love this. I don't think they are expecting the English player to go heavy on the horsemen, but it makes a lot of sense. You want mobility because you want to protect the trade that VortiX is setting up. He's at 3 traders already. And you need numbers of horsemen to deal with that many knights, so might as well go double horsemen. And this could come as a very nasty surprise over here for Airstrike and Victo.
I'm just looking to see if there's any way that they can wiggle back in this, because they have 0 spam and they haven't prepped for it yet. And I think it has been scouted at least, so they know what Mist is doing. They're like, hold on a sec, I've heard of this guy before. I know what he likes building into. It's going to be a frustration for them down the line, so someone is going to have to layer in spears. In the meantime, though, it looks like Knights were not guarding the longbows, so Horsemen will be able to pinch them. Spears are going to have to back off, so it looks like the best trades to open up here for Airstrike and Victo. However, with more spears coming in the wrong way from VortiX, it maybe gets a little bit better. What are you doing? What are you doing here, sir? Leave, please.
Well, he didn't get the chance to leave. He's going to get picked off by the longbows. Farming is being set up on both English players' side, but I feel like the better use of the food is what we have for Mr. right now long term. Not because of his own benefit, but because of the team's benefit. Because he's going to turn the food into horsemen, which are much more suitable to guard the trade. It's all about guarding the trade right now.
Yeah, there's another layer to consider about this, right? It's not just the fact that, you know, he's going to get infinite food that's going to be better than this wood that's going to run out. Well, it's what happens when the wood runs out. You know, Airstrike's going to have to move onto that wood line far, far away. And 2v2s is not that close to your base. And right now, in this 2v2 skirmish, is not looking that good for Villager OP. Longbows get picked apart. Knight count is really not having an impact right now. Just look at the horseman count, up at 17, soon to be 20, compared to less than 5 knights in the field for Villager OP.
And finally, Spearmen make a debut on the playing field in the hands of Airstrike. Problem is that you didn't really increase your mobility, and by the time those Spearmen really come or become factors, that trade could kick in. Although some good knight trades could actually change that. Those knights could be game changers down south.
The count is low right now. The more important detail is to initially block the Silver Tree from even setting up, but Horsemen are on the way. I mean, you say they missed them. They had information on that. Remember, Airstrike, that was his scout up there, right? Like, he saw it. So kind of awkward that they didn't maybe coordinate that and go in for the assault. Maybe they're worried more horsemen are coming back to be a nuisance. They are at least delaying the deploy here, as we can see there.
Yeah, I think they are busy on the gold mine of Victor, though. I think they're just distracted because there's a big push from VortiX out there. Not just horsemen, but spearmen as well.
It's not just that. Also, Mister's rotating around, checking what the English player is doing. He's wondering, is he going on deer? Is he setting up walls? Whatever it is, I'm going to prevent that. So just great raids in this area. But sadly, the spearmen are going to prevent follow-up harassment. He'll just have to back away. But most importantly, he stops that wall from going up.
At Scout, I mean, he's the MVP so far, delaying the Silver Tree for forever, essentially.
Yeah, I'm wondering what Victo's game plan in this area was. He kept dodging the horseman. Finally, we're going to see some impact as he does ride in.
Good pick.
But it's an English TC. You really don't want to dive this.
Yeah, I gotta be cautious. Once your knights are low HP, the horsemen will just dive, and they can always pursue you because they do have higher movement speed. So, look at that, villagers even fighting back. Oh, that
You want
night
some,
feels
bro?
so
You
sad.
want some? Yeah, he's tasting a little bit of sadness there. VortiX, by the way, looks like he went for, yeah, this is the build I was expecting. The Silver Tree initial trade play into fast tech up. The cool thing is if you just do 2 or 3 of these trades at map distance, you get enough for your tech up alone. It's really powerful. So now he's going to make his way up to castle fast. And this is pretty spooky, actually, for Victo. He's going to feel heavily relegated at this rate. He only just reached double digits with the night count. And already his opponent is teching up ahead of him, where he'll be able to get access to his own heavy cavalry.
Yeah, I mean, this is the window where the Mongols, or this strategy overall, is the weakest. Until you reach Castle Age, you're exposed to those knights, in theory at least. But once you get to Castle for VortiX, he's gonna be able to get his own lancers on the field, and the resource income he has from the trade is even going to allow him to probably surpass the knight numbers of Victo. Plus, you also have Castle Age from Mista coming in. This could be very scary very soon for Villager OP.
Yeah, that's definitely one way to get the correct knight count to deal with the French, is to have both players do it. And that's what I'm probably expecting here. Maybe you see more Lombos come from Mista as well. They're pretty effective up in Castle Age. Would make him slower, and I think right now they want to punish the fact that when you look at the map, you can actually see that Villager OP aren't well defended here. Here's the issue I was talking about with the wood lines being too far away, so you get sniped there. And also, in the meantime, they haven't walled themselves off. So it's open territory for Los Pollos Hermanos to prowl through.
I feel like they simply didn't have the chance to wall themselves off. Those horsemen have been skirmishing there for quite a while, and they've been denying walls. Even on the southern part where airstrike has walls, villagers were sacrificed to get those up. So,
oh man,
yeah, it's just feels like these horsemen are denying those walls, and from that point on, it's just a slow bleed.
Well, look what else he's denying. He's denying food. Victor's about to run out of food. He's got no sheep under the TC. He only has the berry patch. He has to come out. And they know that now. That's why they're preventing him in that area. I wouldn't be surprised if we see a second player emerge there. Victo, he's trying to turn the screws as his airstrike to assist. But now the issue is if you ever have to come back home to recover your own eco lines, you've forfeited full map control.
Yeah, he's still up to 60 knights though, so he could think about playing aggressive here. But you have the impression that they need to do something here because on the opposing side, they are losing eco slow and steady. There we go.
No, it's continuing in the back. Like, these horsemen, they've had such a big impact. VortiX, remember that was his initial horseman he had for a long time. Yeah. He hasn't reinvested in them. He's investing in the Lancers now. I'm waiting to see what Mista's going to do, because he's been kind of slow to get the new troop out. Looks like he might be layering in some additional men-at-arms, so interesting choice to ignore Knights himself and instead mass cheaper, chunky boys.
Yeah, you have to be cautious with the gold income though, because right now traders are being intercepted. There was some pressure done on the gold mines as well, and it looks like VortiX has to flee to the north with a bunch of villagers. Yeah, there they are. Knights are seeking targets. Might actually be awarded with some.
That's a big intercept opportunity. Be able to snipe a bunch of them out here. And remember, no Yam, no Deerstones, no quick run away. Spears are at least going to arrive to prevent the second wave of villagers going down. And you need to be careful because you're at risk of pushing them towards your landmark north side. Like, this is the thing that's keeping VortiX in this game, is actually he is gathering away from his base towards the sacred site. That's the only reason he's able to afford these lances right now.
Yeah, for sure, but his OVO is depleted, and if this gold mine ever gets found, this could be disaster. I have to say that Villager OP is doing a decent job with the recovery over here, and at one point, the equation has to click. They have to realize that VortiX is getting gold from elsewhere, and they need to start probing those gold mines.
Yeah, but that time might not arrive quick enough. They might have to take a fight instead. Mista's marching across, but remember, you went for these men-at-arms, not the fastest units. Nice little march around the backside, clips the reinforcements, so nice little pick on the Victo. We'll lose a few of his knights, and that maybe starts to edge things in favor of Los Pollos Hermanos, but they need more.
Yeah, they need more. Uh-oh. This could be big, though. This might just be accidental, to be honest, because this feels like a retreat rather than a deliberate push towards this gold mine. But they will find the villagers, and this is exactly what they need. They're on the back foot, but such damage done here is easily something that could get themselves back into this game.
It's going to force a clash. You can see the Lancers now chasing. Knights looking to intercept as many villagers as possible here. Lombo still exchanging out. Horsemen are going to wrap around to try and counter that out, but no doubt heavy damage done here to VortiX by Villager OP. That Horseman ball not really big enough to dive in either. Lancer count yet to achieve a critical number to overwhelm. Means that actually Villager OP should be able to peel away or take a fight. They're going to be forced to fight though.
They're sacrificing the spearmen to fight here. I'm not sure. I'm really unsure about this. I feel like they could have committed if they wanted to, or just pull everything back altogether. But they lost the Spearman, something that could have been helpful against those Horsemen. Get some free picks on the men-at-arms, though. Knights.
Yeah, Victo overstaying his welcome there. That exchange starts to favor at least the second part towards Mr. a bit, but you see the issue with this men-at-arms play. Like, it's so slow to respond on what's a big map, but you can see what Mr's long-term intent is. He might as well have picked HRE for all intents and purposes, because he wants to do the same sort of thing.
It's long-term booming, right? But you gotta say that Villager OP, compared to where they were 2 or 3 minutes ago, they are at a pretty good position. At least Airstrike is going into Castle Age. He's going to have the second TC working. Victo is going to stay feudal for the time being, but if you look at the eco counts, relatively even. They have done a lot of damage to VortiX. They have bought themselves time. Now, is this enough? I'm unsure, because it's still 2 Castle Age players against just 1, but at least they have definitely given themselves a recovery arc.
Well, the thing to keep in mind is Mr's strategy, it wasn't exactly long-term scaling, it's just the men-at-arms idea. It's kind of like a Burgrave rush, but like on a trigger delay. His men-at-arms ball is meant to get big enough that when he dives the enemy base, everything just shuts down. Problem he's going to have is getting there, first of all. Like, the Knight count is going to keep him at bay pretty effectively. I would love to actually see them layer in some crossbows, actually. Instead of just being raw men-at-arms, get the crossbow counter to this ball of Knights. Man, this is still so open as well. They were trying to get those walls up. Ooh. Something that Los Pollos Hermanos have ignored doing the whole time. It looks like villagers are being ignored by Victo. They'll finally pull them back, but Horseman will be able to pinch it through. And in the meantime, trade is going to start once again for VortiX while they're safe. But unless they wall up, this is always going to be friend.
Yeah, it looks like Mista actually decides to go for the Castle Age Horseman upgrade now. Upgrading those leftover units. Might actually end up canceling
are there any
it.
leftover?
Yeah, exactly. Might as well just cancel it.
It's pretty rough to try and like get the value out of that now. Maybe just step away from Horsemen entirely. Maybe step into Knights instead, or just continue the men-at-arms. I still like the idea of crossbows here, by the way. I think crossbows, longbows maybe a little bit awkward to get into because Airstrike has so many already, but someone needs to answer this Night Ball. It's now up to about 25 for Victo, and it's not slowing down.
Yeah, but if you look at the other side, we are up to 15 Castle Age Lancers as well for VortiX, so now you gotta respect that. This is a nice little place over here to mine gold at, but you gotta finish those walls first. For now, the Lancers won't go in that direction. This is tricky, because as you said, the Night Ball is increasing, but so is the Lancer Ball. Guess what though? Walls complete. This is a beautiful intercept.
Oh, but the armor upgrade's gonna come out in time there, so the arrow will protect him for a little bit. Remember, these are still fuel-aged Knights, not all of them clashed. Reinforcements are on the way. The Spearman Ball is coming in from VortiX, so maybe it converts into a decent fight. We have to remember the Knight advantage was clearly there for Victo, but still not cleaning up all the Lancers and Spears are still going to keep him retreating away for the time being.
Decent trade, but is it good enough? That's the big question, because, oh, there it is.
He's moving in. This is going to idle out the economy. This is what I was waiting for, because remember that fight, Mr. was nowhere to be seen. Instead, he's going to dive into the base, splits up the men-at-arms to chase after villagers. Lombos will eventually win out, but the key here is damage done to economy. Idling and death to villagers. That is the goal of Mr.
And he's doing a really good job with that. Knights will save the day eventually, but damage is done, as you said. And behind this, don't forget, Los Pollos Hermanos are still trading. So this raid is immensely devastating for Villager OP.
He's everywhere. He's absolutely everywhere right now. East, west, whatever's best is going to find them all. And in the meantime, the Lancers are now pressuring into Victo's base again. They will not give them any breathing room. Like you mentioned, they're trading, right? So as long as they can just keep these raids up, keep them running around their own bases, they can get their own eco exploits at home. In fact, you can already see that representative in the numbers. They're now 15 eco units ahead, a decent amount of that being trade.
And now Mist is creeping up with the towers as well for the network of castles buff. Slowly we are seeing Airstrike adding some crossbows. He's gonna need that against both the Lancers and the men-at-arms, but they seem to arrive too late to the party because VortiX's trade is now starting to kick in. Only 10 traders, but they have been untouched for the last 5 or so minutes. And don't forget, Victo is still feudal age. Eventually, that difference is going to start mattering.
Honestly, it's starting to feel like Airstrike might need an Airstrike in-game up against Mr. here. Like, this ball is not shrinking. It's still 40+. And now it's just starting to constantly idle you out, which means Airstrike can't get the solution of crossbows out because he just hasn't got economy to work with. I love the way that they're finding a way to essentially ignore the Night Ball and then eventually pick it apart when it has to split up like this. Small groups of Knights will lose to the men-at-arms, and oh my god, honestly, this is just turning kind of into the Mr. show. Like, we haven't really seen VortiX flash hard for the last 2 or 3 minutes. It's because he doesn't need to. But when he comes in, he's going to do irreparable damage. You're going to start to see that now.
Yeah, I feel like VortiX is the long-term solution for Los Pollos Hermanos.
Yeah.
If this game was going long, which it likely won't at this pace, but if it did, VortiX would be the one carrying the team in the trade. But right now, it's the Mista show, as you said, because it's intermediate period. Mista's eco is kicking in, and this is his time to do damage, while VortiX behind this quietly builds up the trade.
It's like, honestly, at this stage, I don't know how Victo defends his own base and airstrikes, but he has to. He's the only dynamic one, right? So, like, the only good news to them right now is they're diving the English base, so the static army is in place. Dynamic army can react, but even then, where is this static army to speak of? I just, oh god, it kind of is painful to watch. Like, it seems so trivial, so barbaric almost. Just send in more heavily armored troops and it'll work, but it works nonetheless. Mista, he barely even knows that. He's going to take game one. Los Pollos Hermanos will open up, will win. Villager OP, back to the drawing board.
Back to the drawing board they go indeed, and really, we can't forget about that terrific damage that was done at the beginning of this game. The entire game plan for Victo and Airstrike were thrown off by that Man-at-Arms plus Spearman push. VortiX was even awarded with, I think, 2 pieces of bounty, so 50 food, 50 gold from that early aggression. Man-at-Arms, Spearman working wonders, and then for a brief moment it seemed like Victo and Airstrike might be able to climb back in this one, and you can see it on the villager graph. They were able to do decent damage to VortiX. Problem is that behind this, Mista was untouched, and the English eco just kicked in. As you said, by the end of the game, this was all of a Mista show.
Yeah, it just became very trivial for him, right? Like, I wonder why are we not getting Knights? Knights seem like they'd be really good here, but like he didn't want to bait into the Spearman comp. They had no answer for, right? So instead, he just goes mass men at arms. Seems kind of trivial. This is a unit that a lot of players feel like it starts to fall off as the castle stage goes on, but I love the fact that he struck into his timings, right? He didn't kind of allow this stagnant phase of the game to arrive where the men at arms start to fall off, your opponent can recover against it. He just non-stop just kept hitting that button. One button is all it needs. And because he has such a efficiently laid out economy back at home, he can always afford it. And in fact, he continues to scale it. We saw the Imperial Age time come through towards the end that just looked insurmountable at that stage. Just great read by Los Pollos Hermanos to balance their timings, right? To kind of like understand when they couldn't win in the feudal and then hard pivot into Castle Imperial where the opponents actually had no answer because they thought, I really do believe that Villager OP expected this to be a full out feudal on feudal bout for a long time.